Hi, I'm David Bodemer, the editorial director with National Real Estate Investor, here with Dr. David Lynn, who's formerly with Clarion Partners. He's written 3 books about real estate investment that are all available on Amazon. He's got over 25 years experience in the industry, and we're part of a excellent panel like that. We're going to start talking about the state of the economy and how that's sort of affecting the overall picture. So what do you think were some of the key takeaways from that discussion?
Well, in terms of the economy, we're in a slow growth period, certainly below trend. We have high structural unemployment. I don't see that changing for the next 4 to 6 years, unfortunately. We don't have any major engines of growth that'll provide enough impetus to pull us out of that kind of slow growth pattern. And we're just going to see anemic job growth for some time to come. The last month, job reports were not very good, 69,000. So we're in kind of that bumping along, and added to that volatility from this country and globally as well, the European debt crisis, geopolitical crises. So it's a rather mixed view on the economy. We also touched upon demographics, how that affects real estate. We have an older baby boomer population who are behaving differently than previous generations. They're going to be retiring later. They're going to work much later. They're not going to just kind of drop and retire at age 65. They're intellectual workers. They're service workers. They're going to have different spending patterns. That is very significant. Also, there's a younger demographic, the eco boomers, nearly 80 million strong, and they're behaving differently as well. They're not driving as much. They're more urban. They're more educated. They like living in cities. They're using mass transit. So they're transforming these gateway cities more and more. And values really follow the demographics and the investment patterns. And then another thing we mentioned is the pattern of the economy. There are winners and losers. So some sectors are actually doing pretty well, like high tech and medical, certain professional services, ag, energy are doing very well, and others are not. A lot of manufacturing, residential construction, for example, not doing as well. So there's this increasing shakeout economically, and it has this geographic, spatial pattern too. And so more and more the winners are these global gateway cities that have a vibrant economy, have employment, have the demographic, both in baby boomers as well as the eco boomers migrating into these cities.
And I think with the statistic that I think was in the panels, that even with the job growth we've had, we're still something like 5.5 million below the previous peak, and then once you factor in the fact that the U.S. population is growing, it's even more of a deficit. So then that clearly has implications for commercial real estate, since so many of the property types are dependent on jobs, and people being employed, and you need people being employed to go to the stores, go to hotels, all that stuff. So in terms of how that translates into investment, it does seem to kind of back up what you're saying about the core cities, because those are the stronger ones, and the secondary and tertiary ones are still a bit of a problem spot. Is that sort of?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's kind of a bleak picture with respect to the employment pattern. So it'll take a while, many years, we think until about 2016, to regain all those jobs that were lost. So unfortunately, it's more winners and losers. A large swath of the population, particularly those with not, the most advanced skills, let's say, kind of construction people with not a college education have fared worse in this economy, unfortunately. And a lot of people have left the workforce, so they've become discouraged. So the unemployment rate is actually a little bit misleading, because if you include the workers who dropped out of the system, it can actually be higher. So we think that we're in for higher structural unemployment for some time. And if you look at the pattern, again, the locational pattern of that, we tend to see more job growth in these larger global gateway cities. And it's sort of a virtual cycle. We have agglomerations of industries that tend to be more competitive domestically and globally. They're creating more jobs, and they attract higher skilled workers, and they in turn will invest more. They'll start businesses as well. And so that's why we see high tech in some of these areas. I mentioned medical, education, certain professional services, media. But outside of those, it's very much of a mixed pattern. So in a lot of secondary and tertiary cities, you really don't see the job growth. In fact, some of the cities are still losing jobs. We just don't have a dynamic economy, I think, going forward. We have a lot of political stalemate. We have higher taxation, a lot of regulation in this country. Those are all drags on economic growth that I don't see changing anytime soon, unfortunately.
And then the other sort of big question we've got, right, is this euro crisis, and how do you see that shaking out and then coming back and affecting investment in the U.S.? If at all?
The euro crisis is a crisis of confidence. Our exposure, U.S. banks' exposure, is not that great. It's only maybe about 5%. Our exposure to our GDP with respect to exports to the U.S. So if all exports would disappear tomorrow, it would only be 2% of our GDP. That's all it would be. So it's not really that great of an economic effect. It's more of a psychological sentiment effect. And it certainly could hurt the banking sector if a country like Spain defaulted on its bond obligations. Spain and Italy are the most worrisome. I think pretty much Greece is already written into the script. So we assume it'll drop out of the EU. We assume it'll default on all of its bonds. But I think the big issue, really the big problems, are larger economies like Spain and Italy. And I think, who knows, it'll continue to play out. And it'll just be a damper on the economy and investment. So I think a lot of investors are thinking about what happened in the financial crisis, this chain reaction effect that affected so many different banks that were thought to be really independent and not connected with Lehman or the financial system to that degree. So I think that's the major fear, and I think it'll be a damper on financial services, the sector in general, financial stocks. And just this sort of Damocles, hanging over the global economy until we have some degree of transparency on Spain and Italy, that they will continue with austerity, that they will continue to meet their bond obligations, and that they won't go into default and potentially succeed from the EU. Those are the nightmare scenarios in that situation.
All right. Well, thank you so much for spending some time with us.
It's my pleasure,
David. Being at the conference, and make sure to watch other videos in our series from the Strategic Real Estate Investment Conference. Thank you for your time.